Stardust, Chapter 15. Decisions. UFO spotted near Suez Canal met with overwhelming response by Egyptian military. Sources report dozens of aircraft launching to pursue UFO, while ground forces scramble to protect assets in area. Tragedy strikes in Midwest USA as Boy Scout troop out on camping expedition does not return at expected time. Search of the wilderness nearby reveals campsite for the troop, but no sign of the scoutmaster or scouts. No sign of foul play or struggle were found, and the search is ongoing. 8 a.m., April 30th, 2015. Stardust Labs. Beginning log. The experiment with the captured Thin Man specimen didn't go as planned, but what was revealed may still prove valuable. Twilight's ability to provide reliable translation without the use of interrogation techniques have uncovered rather strong evidence that there can be no peaceful option with these invaders. It was a vain hope, held by some, that this conflict might have been resolved once the ability to communicate was established, but the Thin Man's reaction to our attempts were met with unexpected agitation. To be specific, this usual behavior previously acquired in interrogated Thin Men is one of apathy. They stand still and straighten, don't move or react to the outside stimuli until the interrogation's invasive phase begins. The struggles are a natural reaction at this point, but once the brain is sufficiently disconnected from its locomotive sections, this ceases to be a problem. We were expecting a similar reaction during the translation experiments. At worst, what was expected was the calm indifference to the outside world and simply ignoring these attempts. At best, we were hoping to open a dialogue with it to discuss what the invaders were after, and perhaps instigate more traditional interrogation methods. What happened couldn't have been anticipated. Upon attempted conversation, the Thin Man began to strike the walls of its cell while screaming death threats. After mutilating its hands against the glass, then it proceeded to resort to other forms of violence. The specimen expired 2 hours later due to severe cranial trauma. Twilight was removed from the containment environment, and she clearly was showing signs of distress at witnessing such behavior. While this is also purely speculation and without enough evidence to be meaningful, Dr. Mills reported that his attempts at communicating were completely ignored by the specimen, and it only began to react violently after Twilight spoke. He had also indicated that the majority of the specimen's attention was fixed on her the moment her translation ability was used. The possibilities of this reaction are interesting to consider. I must admit that this does provide some more evidence to the theory that Twilight is not affiliated with the invaders. As observed immediately after capture, her physical traits are completely at odds with anything in the captured specimens of the invaders. Her behavior thus far has been shocking, to say the least. She is eager to please, easily embarrassed, and has proven a willing well of information in regarding to most of her abilities as well as her people. If it wasn't for her appearance, I would think that she was a human. End log. Moira Valen caught herself with the words that she had been typing. She had to resist the impulse to scoff as she reviewed what she had written. She is not a human. Valen repeated the words in her mind like a mantra as she scoured the previous paragraph and removed every reference of Twilight's name, as well as any other identifying pronouns, and replaced them with it. I must remain objective. She took a brief moment to look up and see the current process of testing. Dr. No and Dr. Mills were going through the pile of testing materials left by Shen, which thus far has not produced any breakthroughs beside Twilight demonstrating a new ability. Kappa, Twilight chirped as she plucked a large bundle of uninsulated copper wiring from No's hands. Not quite, but very close, Mills said with a smile as he took the apparently non-reactive copper wiring and placed it back into the box. He checked the box on the checklist before turning to No. Have her try it again. Copper. Copper, the female scientist repeated as she stretched out the word's syllables. Copper. Copper? Twilight repeated, then again with a cheer once she recognized the approval of the doctor's faces. Her smile morphed into curiosity when she noticed Valen's attention on her, and she asked a question in her language to Mills. I'll ask. Mills then turned and asked. Dr. Valen, Twilight would like to know if you'll be taking part in the testing today? Moira mentally reprimanded herself from nearly smiling back at Twilight as she replied. No, I will not. Recent events need to be recorded for the monthly summary. Please forward your results to me once testing is complete. Twilight clearly recognized the word no on her face, and fell just a bit until the next item was offered to her. Titanium. Titanium. No sounded the word out for her as she held a small metal wafer out for her to magic into the air. Twilight successfully sounded the word out and grinned widely at her success. and Moira turned back to her work. She closed the file on the previous night's events before opening the file describing the unicorn's abilities. Begin log. Twilight had also begun to display an extreme capacity for learning during her stay at the Stardust Labs. In addition to completing a series of universal math problems ranging from basic arithmetic all the way up to complex trigonometry and calculus in the span of just a few days, and without a calculator, she has gained the capacity to read the English language. After less than a month, she's already reading and writing at a high elementary school level, and I suspect by the end of the week she'll be more proficient with English than the majority of American high schoolers. Her started motivation for learning our languages out of consideration for our concerns regarding her magic. During the initial startup of the Stardust project, it was impressed upon Twilight that her magic might be harmful to us until it could be suitably tested, and this was substantially correct. The true reason for that caution was to ensure that the translation was not some form of mind control or tampering. Regardless of the real reason for that restriction, Twilight agreed to our demands, and I am told she immediately apologized for not considering our feelings on the matter. End log. Again, Moira stopped and reviewed her text. Not human. She repeated her mantra again as she went through the text to depersonalize it, as she did the previous report. I must remain detached. I can't let my judgment be compromised. The trio at the table had moved on to a new test sample, complete with naming of the element sodium. When Valen reached into her pocket and produced a personal voice recorder, she absently plugged in a pair of earbuds into it and then slipped them into her ears before hitting the play button. Only one audio file existed on that recorder, and it set her mind into the right frame to finish the reports with the clinical detachment that used to come to her so naturally. In translation, hello, this is Valen's home. Who's there? I'm Aunt Moira. Is that little Erica here there? Aunt M, it's been forever since I last heard of you. Papa says you're doing some very important stuff to save the world. Is that really true? Yeah, I think that's true, my dear. Is your dad at home? I'd like to talk to him. Yeah, it'll only take a second. Dad, Aunt Moira's on the phone. 8 a.m., April 30th, 2015. Mess hall. Silence hung over the table that Matt and Lana shared as they both worked half-heartedly on their breakfasts. Lana prodded her pancakes with her fork idly before finally speaking. Hey, how do you think our short friend is doing? Better, last I heard. Shun had a word with her after we left and managed to calm her down. Matt answered as he speared a piece of pancake with a fork and swallowed it with hardly any chewing. I have to say, I certainly wasn't expecting that kind of reaction from our other guest. What kind of guy loses his shit when someone says hello? The kind you triple tap and then kick in the head for good measure? Came Lana's deadpan reply. Well, I won't argue with that. Matt chuckled and nodded as he downed another bite of pancakes. I suppose it's good to know that in the long run that our other guest wasn't really looking for a peaceful option, and I swear, if you make some sort of joke about job security, I'll smack you. Lana had a mouthful of pancakes at this point and was about to start speaking before swallowing to stop her food. Speaking of job security, I suppose congratulations are in order, Sergeant. Valen gave us the green light to return for active duty, and I heard that the doctors gave you a go-ahead also. What I want to know is where my promotion is. I was the one who had to chase down a chrysalid like the damn police. Perhaps it's something to do with your rampant misuse of XCOM assets for your pranks. Hey, I thought we were past that, Casanova. Lana smirked, turning into a flat glare before switching again to her trademark smirk as she looked behind Matt. Oh, Zang, care to join us? That was my intention, yes, came the polite reply as the Chinese man pulled out a chair beside Matt and sat. His breakfast was a simple bagel and a glass of water. This raised the eyebrows of the other soldiers at the table. He tore off a bite's worth of the bagel with his fingers and popped it into his mouth before he finally noticed the amount of attention he had garnered from his neighbors. Old habits tend to die hard. That's a rather Spartan breakfast. Is that part of your habits too? Lana asked with an inquisitive look. Zang tore off a bit of the bagel and took another bite before replying. I suppose it is, yes. Speaking of habits, I imagine I'm not the only one who's curious about your background, Matt asked as soon as he sensed the opportunity. I don't mean who you were working for just before joining us. I mean where you got your original training. You know, civilians don't really carry soldiers across their backs. I mean, civilians don't stick to cover unless suppressing fire can be provided. Zhang's eyes narrowed as Matt continued his evaluation before he shrugged. You are very perceptive, Sergeant. What would you like to know? The moment Zhang spoke the rank, Matt was already waving his hand. Our ranks are mostly relaxed when we're not deployed. Just call me Matt or Harris. Or Casanova. Lana added, as she earned a brief glare before Matt returned to the topic at hand. So, Matt remained to regain his initiative. Where did you get your training? If you don't want to share, that's all fine, but I was in the US Army prior to working at XCOM. He looked leadingly to Lana, who was in the process of jamming a forkful of pancakes in her mouth. She tried to explain, but the pancakes provided a sufficient blockade to prevent any understandable words through. She quickly swallowed and tried again. CB's U.S. Navy attached to the Public Works Department. Zhang nodded his understanding, but Matt didn't. CB's? How does a Navy engineer end up as part of a combat unit fighting aliens? He asked as he made no attempt to mask his disbelief. It happens when that Navy engineer is attached to a domestic naval installation that came under attack by the invaders, and she defended herself with extreme prejudice. I'm assuming that attracted the attention of XCOM, so, well, here I am. With her explanation complete, Lana's eyes turned back to Zang. Zang ate another bite of the bagel as he considered his words. I was part of my country's special operations forces running counterterrorism and anti-piracy operations. My time with them was cut short due to an injury that they felt I couldn't recover from. I did recover, but by then my spot was filled and I had to find employment elsewhere. Say no more, Lana said before immediately contradicting herself. So, any interesting operations while you were with them? The question was initially answered with a skeptical look before Zhang finally replied. I did take part in the anti-piracy operation directed by the UN back in 2008. Wait, I think I remember that. What was that like? Boring. The immediate answer was rewarded with a snore from Lana. We have much better luck with surgical strikes when target pirates, not sitting on a warship, would attack your convoy of ships in your little speedboat when there's a legitimate warship nearby. That's true enough, I suppose. I mean, you can't always account for stupid. I mean, back in the desert, we were escorting a supply convoy when suddenly this guy comes out waving an axe, like he means business. Matt started to explain. But since we were in trucks and he's on foot, he starts getting left in the dust, screaming curses and waving that damn axe. So, what did you do? Zhang asked as he took another bite. Matt's response was to grin. Nothing. He tripped and fell face first onto the pavement and knocked himself out. Never saw that loon again. The punchline got Lana grinning and the ghost of a smile with Zang. Seriously though, it would seem a bit more logical to make something like Q ships and mix them in with the usual pirate bait rather than put all your forces in something that pirates will avoid. You seem to be operating under the misunderstanding that those in command know what they're doing, Zhang said as he tore off another bite. Our presence there was just a publicity stunt in the end. Show the world we care rather than putting troops in our position to do actual work. Vich, politics. Lana frowned, but before she could continue, her watch beeped. So did Matt's, and surprisingly so did Zhang's. Oh, nuts. Okay, Matt and I gotta get ready for his hot date. Jenkins. And it sounds like you have plans too, Zang. I suppose we'll meet up at the firing range or for lunch? Actually, Zhang answered thoughtfully as he finished his bagel. I'll be joining you. I have expressed my desire to serve this organization as best I can, so I volunteered to assist with the Stardust project. Commander Bradford contacted me with the approval just this morning. What? Zhang's pride in his announcement was lost as he noticed the look that both Matt and Lana now shared. What? 8:30 a.m. April 30th, 2015. Corridor B3F. Shioji Zhang was never one to doubt himself. The closest he had come thus far had been the discussion he had with Commander Bradford as to his intentions for volunteering. To call that conversation comfortable would be inaccurate. The chat he had now found himself nominally participating in with Lana and Matt was giving him pause. I mean, are you sure you want to volunteer for this, man? I mean, this isn't the work you're thinking of, I guarantee it. Matt explained quickly, and Lana was quick to nod. I mean, seriously, Matt, no one will think less of you for choosing something else to occupy your time. I hold myself to this standard for a reason. You are willing to continue your volunteer work despite your injury, Matt. What would that make me if I didn't volunteer for the same thing while being perfectly healthy? Zhang asked rhetorically. Sane? Lana replied quietly, but was silenced when Matt elbowed her in the side. She then turned to glare at Matt before she cut him off. Seriously, he doesn't have such noble and lofty goals. He's volunteering because he's chasing a hot piece of tail at the lab. Jenkins! Zhang didn't respond to that bit of news beyond an almost imperceptible narrowing of the eyes. Americans always mixing business with personal pursuits, he thought, and he felt his respect for the soldier drop just a notch. I was under the impression that such socialization was frowned upon, the Chinese soldier added after choosing his words carefully. I'm not volunteering because I'm chasing a hot piece of tail, and as far as I know, there's no rules on fraternization so long as it doesn't affect security or the effectiveness of the base and its personnel, Matt huffed as he glared at Lana. Lana's grin became predatory as she latched onto Matt's statement. Methinks the lady doth protest too much, and you check the rulebook beforehand to cover your bases. I think she's rubbing off on you. I read the regulations when I joined XCOM. There's nothing going on. This conversation is ridiculous, was the only conclusion that Zang could come up to, and some form of his displeasure must have been recognizable on his face, as Lana was quick to notice. Ladies love a man with scars, but they hate it when they scowl, Zang, she stated, and it was more difficult than Zang cared to admit not to scowl any further. I imagine Matt's thankful. I doubt she'll be your type, so there's no competition for him to worry about. And you presume to know my preferences? Zang asked coolly as he masked his irritation. Lana's flippancy was novel when they first introduced, but now that novelty was starting to wear thin. Well, you don't strike me as the kind that likes them short, hairy, and Jenkins! Matt snapped. Seriously, what the hell happened to the deal we made yesterday? The one where you agreed to stop this crap? It expired this morning when you brought my pranks up. Seriously, you should be thankful. I never gave my brothers 5 minutes of peace, and I gave you almost an entire day. Lana grinned impishly. Seriously, the only way to make me stop now is to admit the inevitable and profess your feelings to her, or I'll never stop hounding you about it. Matt's response was to simply facepalm as they turned to the corner of the Stardust Labs. Both guards framing the doorway gave Zang a wary look after sparing less than a second of attention on Matt or Lana. The other two soldiers stopped and gave Zang a serious look that quite contrasted their previous joking tones. Okay, this is it. Last chance to turn back. What you see in there can't be unseen, and you absolutely cannot talk about it with anyone who isn't part of the project. So, you still in? Matt asked seriously, and Zang looked to Lana to see the serious expression mirrored on her face as well. Yes, I am certain, Zang nodded, and he drank deeply of the significantly more professional atmosphere that he now found himself in. Alright. Now, I do have to warn you, there's someone in there that isn't like us. Treat her like you would like a little sister, Matt started, but was interrupted by Lana. Or girlfriend, if she's really your type. Matt needs a rival to get himself in gear. And just like that, the professional atmosphere was gone. And you shouldn't have any problems. Matt finished with a flat glare at Lana, who simply ignored it. So, you ready? Zang nodded and the trio resumed their walk towards the door. Matt and Lana's badges were swiped through the card reader without much fanfare, but the guards went the whole 9 yards to confirm that the third was authorized to be there. I should be used to such suspicions by now, he thought to himself, though he didn't dwell on it as the door opened and they entered. The door opened to reveal a small entry room cordoned off to the next area with a plastic curtain to block easy viewing further into the lab while the door was open. Muffled speech could be heard, though it didn't become clear until Matt pulled back up the curtain and stepped inside. Aluminum? Came a young and accented feminine voice from further into the lab, and Zang arched an eyebrow. That voice is far too young to be a scientist or engineer, perhaps a civilian? He clenched his teeth as another possibility came to him. Perhaps it's a child that was exposed to the invaders in such a way that they need to be studied? If so, that would be tragic. Hey, good morning, Twilight, both Matt and Lana said as they stepped past the plastic curtain. A string of language Zang had never heard before answered them, which only increased his curiosity. He stepped through the curtain after the other two soldiers, and froze. The lab he now found himself in was dominated by a large table lined with boxes and odd bits of metal and wiring. Two scientists sat on either side of the tables as they opened and emptied the boxes and offered the contents to something. It sat at the head of the table, which was varying shades of purple. Its body was a lighter shade, while the hair on top of its head was a much darker color, but with a pink highlight running down the middle. Also perched in the middle of her forehead and poking through her hair was a horn of the same color as the rest of its body. Oh, hello, it said in its accented English as it waved an arm, leg, limb at him and smiled. Its eyes were purple, as well as looking at Zang with unabashed curiosity. The doctor to its right, a short Korean woman, offered a block of some material to it. Palladium, palladium, the doctor repeated and instantly copied her. The block of palladium then appeared to float out of the doctor's hand and hovered over to the other doctor, who checked the piece of paper on his clipboard before placing the mineral block into an empty box. Twilight, we have a new friend who will be visiting us for a while. His name is Zhang. Matt introduced Zang to it, but he barely registered the words. Zang, this is Twilight Sparkle. She's an unaffiliated third party to XCOM's current conflict. No, she isn't human. Yes, she's a unicorn. Yes, that's magic she's using, and you'll have to forgive her English. She's trying very hard. The other scientist at the table turned to Zang with an appraising eye. This one was a man in his late 40s with gray hair and a slight grin on his face. Oh, dear, I know that look. You had that same look on your face when you first came here, Matt. He doesn't believe what he's seeing. Here, I'm Dr. Joel Mills, and this is my colleague Kim No. You just missed Moira Valen, and she's the research department lead. You'll recognize her the moment the temperature in the room drops to 10 degrees. Hello? No, Twilight Sparkle, said a bit less confidently, as she seemed to recognize the amount of scrutiny that was now being directed her way, and was trying to escape it by crouching low and dropping her horse-like ears. Of all the things Shoji Zhang was expecting to find when he volunteered, this just was not it.